Welcome to the Learner Center Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Martin, and to end the podcast season and the 2024 year, I wanted to share some of my reflections on change in education. I've had the opportunity to listen, learn, and co-design in systems with many of the guests on this podcast and our partner network. And there are some themes that continue to come up for me as we look to see meaningful and sustainable change in education that aligns with our modern world and ensures that all learners know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. I wrote this blog as 2020 was approaching, pre-pandemic, and I wanted to go back and review these themes 5 years later to see what has changed and what remains the same. There are 10 themes that I want to dive into today. The first is educators are working harder than ever. It's not more that will fix our schools, it's different. The second, it's the people, not programs, or even the AI that are capable of the changes we seek in education. 3, if you look to learners, you will find solutions. 4, celebrate and elevate what's working. 5, there are more similarities than differences among all of us. 6, there are many paths to success. Let's help people find theirs. 7, there's too much to do and the stakes are too high to go at it alone. 8, our fear, or what we perceive as failure, may be the biggest barrier to change. 9, doing work that matters. And finally, 10, our beliefs impact opportunities and access for learners. All right, let's dive in to see what has remained the same and what has changed in the last 5 years. So back to number 1, educators are working harder than ever. It's not more that will fix our schools, it's different. I think this one remains even more true than it was 5 years ago pre-pandemic. We saw the narrative as educators as superheroes, requiring them to do so much more and go above and beyond to really meet the needs of learners. And 5 years ago, I highlighted that despite many reforms, new mandates and programs, and constant focus on improving test scores, the New York Times had highlighted performance of American teenagers in reading and math has been stagnant since 2000. Our recent studies revealed that 2/3 of American children were not proficient readers, and that the achievement gap in reading between high and low performers is widening. Many educators and learning communities that are making an impact on learners are not just adding more to an outdated model, they're doing things differently. 5 years later, we continue to see that this gap is widening, and many challenges resulted from the pandemic and access that young people had. This continues to be true. As Monty Syrie told me, too many educators are trying to do school harder. And post-pandemic, we see that chronic absenteeism is another central challenge. We can keep focusing on getting kids in the building with rewards and punishments and expecting teachers to be superheroes, or we can address why kids aren't coming to school and the adults are leaving the profession. We have plenty of data points highlighting our stagnant model, and most importantly, lots of kids telling us that school feels irrelevant, and more than half telling us they don't feel prepared for their future. This remains true, that educators are working harder than ever, but sometimes I wonder if we are getting better at the wrong things. Our system was designed for a different era where standardization was the goal, and as a result, it's not intended to develop the skills our students need to be successful today. So as we think about this theme that continues to be present, the following themes are looking at how we can continue to shift our practices and our mindsets to create the systems that we need to make sure that we all thrive in our education ecosystems. So the second theme, it's the people, not the programs, or even the AI that are capable of the changes we seek in education. Here's what I said 5 years ago. Over the last 10 years, we have seen one-to-one access become a norm, yet still not ubiquitous. Vast amounts of digital tools and programs have come and gone, but these tools and programs are only as good as the people and the systems we design them to exist in. It's the educators who connect with one another, build relationships, and provide effective feedback to each other and their learners. It's the people who understand the needs of their students in the community and create experiences that are aligned with their goals, context, and aspirations. It's the people, not programs, that drive change. 5 years ago, AI was a thing that people mentioned here and there, at least in my circles. And it seemed cool, but inaccessible and way too futuristic. And now with ChatGPT and loads of other tools, it has become not only accessible, it has become a differentiator for many in their work and personal lives. However, in schools, we continue to have a growing gap between those who use AI to teach young people how to use it and those who swear it off as the devil. I promise I heard that last week. And too often there's more of the latter. I see events and webinars and district task forces discussing AI and the future of education, much like the discussion when iPads and Chromebooks started to make their way into schools. We focused on the apps, the tools, and not nearly as much as the learning experiences that were possible. I see a lot of potential and challenge, to be clear, with AI and emerging technologies. But we have to decide if we're going to use these tools to make an outdated, standardized industrial model of education easier to do to kids and teachers, or if we're going to create learner-centered systems that provide an education and leverages the best of people and harnesses emerging technology and AI to create learning ecosystems that are personalized, competency-based, and authentic in order to prepare young people to thrive in our modern world. To do this well brings me to theme 3. If you look to learners, you will find solutions. I continue to see this becoming more and more important and helpful as we co-design and create learning experiences and ecosystems that really meet the needs of all learners. As a classroom teacher, I always try to seek feedback in multiple ways, including having students grade me and give me report cards. I had a mailbox for comments, and most often just listening and observing, I got plenty of actionable feedback that allowed me to understand how to improve and create opportunities for young people to get what they need. I continue to get the best ideas from asking learners what they need, whether it be in graduate school or in professional learning or with adults. If you are wondering what's working and what's not, ask learners. Want to know how to solve problems in a school, community, or the world? Ask students for their feedback. If we want to know how to fix professional development, ask teachers. Seriously, we just need to keep asking. We too often assume we know what the answer is, assume we know how to fix something, and we don't ask people closest to the challenge or the opportunity to get their feedback. Throughout the last 5 years with Learner Centered Collaborative and many of our partners, we have doubled down on this. Having student forums and events and, bringing kids onto the podcast and into professional learning. And it has been the most powerful thing for educators to stop and listen and really understand not only the challenges, but the opportunities. And every time we ask kids, they're so excited to give their feedback. They're so excited to be listened to. And this is also true with educators, right? We want to make sure, stop, listen, get feedback. And we often find that people give their best and work harder when they feel like they're listened to and their ideas are relevant and acted upon. Which brings me to 4. If you follow the podcast or any of the weekly newsletters, you know that I believe in this wholeheartedly. Celebrate and elevate what is working. There is so much that happens throughout the week, and it's easy to get so bogged down by the challenges, whether it's with students or colleagues or even your own practice. There are always going to be things that need to improve, but it makes such a difference when we focus on the positives and celebrate one another. Because when we focus on the good often gets better. And this is not to say that we ignore challenges and only focus on the good, but it does mean that if we want to improve, we have a much better chance if we first create time and space to acknowledge and celebrate success. People are more confident, passionate, and do better work when you focus on what's right with them instead of what's wrong with them. And creating these authentic learning experiences that empower learners to develop the skills and talents to manage themselves and build on their assets rather than focus on the deficits maximizes the motivation, contribution, and impact of all learners. So we have seen such success doing bright spot walks. I have shared this many times, but superintendents often tell me when we go and visit their schools and throughout the district and focus on all the bright spots, they often say, "This is the best day I've ever had." And I remind them that they can do this every day. Yes, there's other work, but going throughout your community and taking a moment to intentionally focus on what's working and celebrating it can have a positive impact on not only the individual seeking those bright spots, but when you share those with the community, they can see what matters, they can be celebrated for the great things they're doing, and be inspired to continue to grow those practices that we want to see more and more of. So I encourage you to really seek out what's working and elevate the bright spots in your community. Theme 5. This really resonates and again continues to resonate 5 years later. There are more similarities than differences among all of us. And you might say, "You're crazy, Katie, because the country feels so divided and the rhetoric is more polarized than ever." However, I believe and I have seen year after year that when we focus on learners and we focus on young people and what we want for our kids and their future, I see communities come together time and time again in service of a shared vision. And we can, if we listen and if we are willing, come together to really create amazing opportunities for our students. Here's what I shared, and I still believe years later. I have worked with educators in small rural communities, on islands in the Pacific, in the middle of Alaska, in urban cities, in suburban communities across charter, public, and private schools. At a superficial level, there seem to be so many differences. And sure, there are many differences in food, culture, dialect, geography, but at the core, I always find that people have so much more in common than the differences we tend to focus on. Regardless of where I ask people about their aspirations for young learners, their responses are the same. We all want kids to be healthy, happy, confident, capable learners, and problem solvers. We want kids who can understand multiple perspectives, read and make sense of the mass amount of information, and communicate their ideas effectively. We won't be able to do this for kids if we don't expect it of ourselves and model this for our students. That was what I wrote 5 years ago, and again, it continues to be more true than ever. So, given that our next theme is 6, there are many paths to success. Let's help people find theirs. In learner-centered innovation, I highlighted the Gallup poll and how engagement plummets from 5th grade to 12th grade to about 35%. Students indicate they have few opportunities to build on their strengths or do something that they enjoy in school. Unfortunately, this trend continues into the workplace. In 2015, now 10 years ago, the Gallup poll found that most U.S. workers continue to fall into this disengaged category. These employees are not hostile or disruptive. They show up and kill time, doing the minimum required with little extra effort to go out of their way for their customers. They are less vigilant, more likely to miss work and change jobs when new opportunities arise. They are thinking about lunch or their next break. Not engaged employees are either checked out or attempting to get their job done with little or no management support. To harness the power in each of us, we need to create systems that tap into the strength and potential of each individual. I think it begins with what these students advocated for in a change.org petition shared in the Chicago Tribune. Students want the administration to broaden their narrow path of success defined by test scores and college acceptance. The high school students beg to start defining success as any path that leads to a happy and healthy life. Start teaching us to make our own paths and start guiding us along the way. And if we're honest, isn't this what we all want? To be happy and healthy and do work that give us purpose and joy? When we think about the students that we see in our classrooms and we think about the engagement challenges we continue to see post-pandemic, we want to think about how to create those opportunities to help young people find their paths. We have the technology, we have tools, we have access to create differentiated paths and help young people figure out what they're good at and how to create and navigate their path. Then we can see that these young people will grow into engaged employees in our workforce and not continue to be in this disengaged category. This idea of engagement isn't just something that's fluffy or for fun. If we don't engage people in their work, if we don't engage people to have ideas and be curious and solve problems that matters, this is a problem not only in school, but it's a greater problem for the rest of us in our modern world. All right, theme 7. There is too much to do and the stakes are too high to go at it alone. I think this continues to be very true as we work with more organizations and different partners, recognize the opportunities there are to lift people up and to collaborate on work to bring out the best in all of us so that we can get to our shared vision. When we celebrate and honor the differences in one another, including culture, race, gender, experiences, and preferences as assets that people bring with them, we can create more interesting, inclusive, and welcoming learning communities and worlds. Our differences can be such strengths, not only deficits. This quote from Henry Ford captures the difference in calling yourself a team and working together as a team. He says, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. Too often in team meetings or staff meetings, I think we have become accustomed to showing up and counting that as our duty, but it is not a success. Showing up is the first step, but to come together as a team, as a staff, as a community, is putting all of the expertise together to work towards something that will improve outcomes for all learners and is what we should be working towards every day. There is too much to do and the stakes are too high to go at it alone. I have been so fortunate to work with our partners in so many different communities where I have seen this come to fruition in the last 5 years. Whether it's guiding coalitions, including business partners, communities, educators in classrooms and schools, school leaders, district leaders, students, really coming together to talk about what's possible, do empathy interviews and work, look at their conditions, look at their aspirations, and really collectively create a shared vision and work together to make it happen. It has been one of the greatest joys of my professional career to see these communities coming together and really thinking about what's possible for kids. And I truly believe that this approach is not only possible, but necessary to shift education. We talk a lot about moving from a top-down model to thinking about building in communities and creating something together is really the future of education, and moving from classrooms as silos and school districts, as isolated things to really working with community and creating schools and districts that are hubs of the community rather than working in isolation. So it's really exciting, and we need to do so much more of it so that we can really create the future that we aspire to see. All right, theme 8 is something that often gets in the way of creating these new aspirations and working towards them. And theme 8 is really our fear of, or what we perceive as failure, that is the biggest barrier to change. So there's a lot of talk about failure, the fear of it and what's possible, but also embracing failure and modeling failure. And this is great. I really believe it's important and we need to confront what it really means to fail. But when I think about failure, it is much more than getting a bad grade or even getting into the college you want. Those things feel scary, and we really need to talk about it. But when I think about failure in education, and what I'm really afraid of is failing our students, failing our communities, failing the country, and really thinking about not looking at our systems and really being relentless about the things that are not working. And I think if we were really, really afraid of failing, we would be relentless in looking at learners and thinking about shifting our pedagogical practices, creating better systems and policies that really do align with what learners need and support a more holistic view of success that aligns with the skills that we know are critical for young people to have to be successful, not only in school, but in life and in their career path, and as effective citizens. So, thinking about that, I think it's really important to not just look at the initial failure or missteps that might be right in front of us, but really thinking more broadly that if we fail to act and if we fail to do something different, that is the biggest challenge. And we will not be able to create the systems that we know are necessary without taking some risks, calculated risks, but if without taking some risks to really move the system forward. And as Brene Brown says, there is no innovation and creativity without failure, period. So it's important that we really think about small failure in the grand scheme of things and what that means for a larger failure if we don't move together in a direction that is really going to get us to our aspirations. So 9, the ninth theme is doing work that matters. And I say this a lot. It means, it means a lot for young people and adults as well. And like many educators, I've been guilty of creating my fair share of assignments that were just for the grade book, to have evidence of a certain standard, or had no further goal than just to be turned in, graded, and handed back, which ultimately landed in the trash can in most cases. And as my son pointed out to me early on, that doing work that just turned in doesn't feel quite as good as doing work that gets to be seen and experienced by others. And even as a 9-year-old in 3rd grade, he could see that that made a huge difference, and he was much more motivated and inspired to do work that mattered. So in contrast to many of these isolated worksheets and activities, Ron Berger reminds us that when we finish school and enter the world of work, we are asked to create work of value. Scientific reports, business plans, websites, books, architectural blueprints, graphic artwork, investment proposals, medical devices, software applications, and more. And when I see my colleagues do work that matters, when I see my own kids that do work that matters, you see such a different level of engagement and motivation. Being able to present to an authentic audiences really pushes people to take the basic skills and standards that they are learning and use them in a context that matters. And so when this work is authentic and purposeful, students not only learn to improve in their reading and speaking and writing and communicating, but they also demonstrate them in ways that are authentic and meaningful and provide purpose and motivation for learning. So this is something that we have to really look at in our classrooms and really see if our work that we're assigning, if the expectations are of value and worthy of the time and investment that we're really putting into them, not only in students doing the work, but in grading them. I see teachers so often coming home with stacks and stacks of papers that they have to grade and give feedback, and the students never look at them. And we got to think about how can we use the time in class to give meaningful feedback, to help young people learn and grow, leverage the technology and resources, but collaborate in authentic context so that we're doing work that matters and we're simultaneously building these important skills. it does by no way means that we don't want to focus on the reading and writing and speaking and communicating, but it's so much more valuable when we can do that in a context that feels authentic and meaningful and worthy of developing those important skills. And finally, theme 10 is kind of an underlying piece that continues to be so important in this work. Our beliefs impact opportunities and access for learners. I again see this through line in our work when we walk into districts or schools or classrooms. You see the culture is so evident in how people interact and how they talk about one another and talk about the possibilities. And those beliefs or mindsets that we hold about learners really do shape the opportunities that we create. So if we really want to create learning environments in our schools where all learners are valued and seen as capable of achieving desired outcomes, we have to begin with the belief that they can. When we expect certain behaviors of others, we are likely to act in ways that make them expected behaviors more likely to occur. There's a lot of talk about creating opportunities for students to interact and have more voice and choice in their own learning. But I also hear teachers who hold back because they aren't sure that their students would actually be capable of this type of work, or administrators that tell me, it sounds great, but my teachers aren't ready for this. We hold people back based on our assumptions and our fear rather than believing in their ability to try, learn, and grow. As a teacher, every time I tried something with my students, I learned very quickly what worked and what didn't. As an instructional coach, I got to work with other teachers to help them shift practices to be better and impact how students were learning. To this day, every time I walk into a school or classrooms, I see and learn new things. I better understand the barriers we face, but most of all, I continue to expand my view of what is possible as I see so many examples in diverse schools and classrooms that are leading the way. We have so many opportunities to shift what is happening in schools. And it really starts, although this is the last theme and kind of is ending this, it is so important that we address our own mindset, address our beliefs, and really start to believe in people, give them opportunities to try new things, give ourselves that permission to try new things, and continue to collaborate with one another to figure out what's possible, to talk about what we want, to dream, and then make it happen. So as we end 2024, whenever and wherever you're listening to this, I hope that these 10 themes that I wrote about and talked about 5 years ago and have continued to deepen my belief in how important they are through the pandemic and through all we've changed, coming out on the other side. It's important that we really interrogate what's working and what's challenging and work together to create a new and better system for all of our learners. So thank you very much. Wishing you all a great break if you're listening to this now. And I'm excited to see what 2025 brings. Thanks for all you do. Keep working together to make it happen.